fellow Falcoholics patrons. Welcome to our Falcoholic Live Falcons Q&A session for the month of November. Thank you guys so much for your support each and every month, all of you. And we're going to start off right off the top of the show welcoming our newest patron, Brandon Brass. Don't worry, Brandon, we're going to give you a shout out on a mainstream live show as well, but definitely wanted to give a shout out to Brandon joining as one of our 4 Falcoholic tier patrons at $25 a month. Brandon, thank you so much for that, man. We really appreciate you and everyone else who's been taking part. I know we got a bunch of questions from Patreon, and I know there's some of you in the live chat as well, so feel free to put anything you guys have in there and we'll try to get to that. And we have some great guests for you guys, as we teased earlier. As you can see, we have Dave Choate, the Falcoholic himself, at the Falcoholic on Twitter. Dave, how are we doing tonight?
Doing great. It's still Saints victory week as far as I'm concerned, so I'm a happy man.
Yeah, this is a good time to do this. You know, once I saw we had a Saints win in our back pocket, I knew that we had to do the Patreon Q&A this week because, you know, we might not get this chance again anytime soon, unfortunately, based on how this team generally plays against the Saints. So also with us tonight, we have David Walker, aka DW, and I feel like last time you were on, DW, you said like no one ever calls me that. This is literally the only time anyone calls me David Walker is when I do the intro, so I felt like I had to sort of leave it just because that as like a bit. But he is at Falcoholic DW on the Twitters, host of the Falcoholic podcast. How are you doing tonight, DW?
I'm good. Gina still calls me David. So.
Oh, okay. Well, then it's not just me. Yeah. Okay. Well, that takes a little bit of the fun out of it, so maybe I'll have to change it again. But as you can see, also joining us tonight, Gina Kelly at Gina Thomas on Twitter. I know it's I know it's a little confusing, folks, but it's okay. I'm sure you guys can figure it out. I have faith in you, Gina. How are we doing tonight?
Doing great, thanks, Kevin. How are you?
Doing good.
Good.
Yeah, guys. Well, we'll jump right into it. I know we had a question from Brian McWhorter, one of our patrons for a couple months now, and it's about the Mike Davis Cordell Patterson split, which is a hot topic these days, obviously among Falcons fans. But Brian is a little bit more understanding of Mike Davis. So he says technically Mike Davis has actually outperformed Patterson in 4 or 5 of 8 games based on yards per carry. But Patterson does seem to get a lot more yards from explosive plays. So shouldn't we be more focused, maybe concerned on why our offensive line can't seem to open holes more consistently for either guy rather than just focusing on Mike Davis? So I think that is a pretty good question, Brian. And I think it's worth talking about for sure because, I mean, I think we've tried to argue that it's probably more the offensive line's fault than just Mike Davis. And I think, Mike Davis's running style tends to lend more to the running game. But, yeah, I mean, I'll open it up to you guys. I talked about it at great length yesterday, so you guys can get a word in here. But, is it Mike Davis or is it the offensive line or is it some combination of both that we should be upset with? Oh man, don't all jump at this one at once. I softballed that one in there. So
I'll go first. I think everybody knows by now that I have a stake in Mike Davis succeeding because I really like that signing and I wrote very glowingly about it when it happened. But I think it is an offensive line concern to me. I think you saw what Mike Davis did a year ago in Carolina with a not so great offensive line, but what he was able to do is, not get hit by 3 guys at the same time. It was 1 maybe, and he was able to turn that into positive yardage. And, the tricky thing here is, to your point, Brian, Cordell Patterson is more explosive. He is more likely to break that big play than Mike Davis. We know that because we keep seeing it. We know that because of the kind of back that Mike Davis is. But I also think that Davis, the fumbles recently being the unfortunate part of this, but aside from that, he is the most likely to get you that tough yard or 2 you absolutely need. And I think that the Falcons just have to keep plugging away with their offensive line and trying to get the blocking to where they're giving Davis and Patterson really a fighting chance, before they can. Half the time I feel like we're looking at run plays, and I certainly felt like this against New Orleans, where these guys are not even getting close to the line of scrimmage before they're being, contacted, and you're asking them basically to have their momentum slowed and then immediately go into more contact and turn that into a positive gain. And I think that Patterson being so good has sort of swayed people to say, Mike Davis isn't any good, but I don't think that's true. I think this really is a blocking issue fundamentally.
Yeah.
And until that really gets alleviated to some extent, which is just going to come from improvement because they're not changing the lineup, as far as I'm aware, this is going to be the case for both of these guys. I think that Patterson and Davis could be a great tandem if they had a little bit of room to work. And I just don't know when that room to work is going to come. It's frustrating. And in the meantime, you're going to hear a lot about Mike Davis's pass protection because that's something he does well. And it's something the coaching staff like Dave Ragone can talk up. But, it really is just one of those frustrating things where there's no like magic bullet here. I don't think Wayne Gallman's going to do considerably better behind this line, even though I might like to see a little bit more of him. I don't think the blocking is going to drastically improve if you start yanking guys out of the lineup. So it really is just we're in for a tough rest of the year probably for the ground game unless there's some drastic improvement or Arthur Smith figures out something that he hasn't figured out to this point. But, long-winded way of saying I ultimately blame the offensive line primarily for this. Obviously, I think Davis could play better than he has to this point. I think Patterson probably could too, a little bit as a runner, but it's just going to be something that's going to have to work itself out slowly. And in the meantime, it's a constant frustration, especially when the passing game is doing well. But
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yeah, it is. I think you raised a lot of good points there. And, I think it's really easy to blame the running back, but I think there's, two schools of thought with it. And it's like, oh, it's all on the offensive line or it's all on the running back. And it's probably like half and half. But, I think in my mind, it's probably easier to blame the running back because they're the one getting tackled in every play. And it's, I think, harder for the average fan, no offense to anyone, to sort of evaluate run blocking because it can be complicated, especially if you don't know exactly what the call is and, what they're supposed to be doing. But, yeah, I sort of lean towards it's more the offensive line. But it's hard to say. I mean, I think that we've seen Cordarrelle Patterson sort of get more on his carries than is blocked, and I think we've seen Mike Davis really take advantage of the blocking when it's good. And I think a lot of people are sort of like ready to see Wayne Gallman. And I think that makes sense too because we know Wayne Gallman can run behind a bad line. I mean, he ran for 4.6 yards per carry behind the Giants line last year. So I guess I get that aspect of it too, but I'm not sure there's any easy answers. And with the offensive line and run blocking in particular, it's all about chemistry and cohesion there. And it's just, this is a brand new starting five. And I think it's going to take time and hopefully it starts to come together more over the remainder of the season, but certainly hasn't come together yet. Yeah. Anyone else have anything they want to add on that question? Also,
I think you have to look at the defenses we played too. New Orleans last week going in, they were allowing just 3.5 yards per carry. I think that dropped to like 3.2 after the Falcons game. But they had a very the best run defense in the league. When we played Tampa Bay, they have a really good defensive line. We've sort of faced in these first several games several defenses that have a lot of talent up front, even if they're not necessarily the best pass rushing teams. Several of these teams, Washington, New York included, actually are quite good against the run. And so I think some of it is small sample size. I think some of it is our opponents. And, when you're instituting a new zone blocking scheme, which is what he's running now, because, Cutter had moved us back primarily to power blocking. And now we're going back again to zone blocking. Zone blocking requires a lot of coordination and timing amongst the offensive linemen, especially when you're getting into those second level blocks, because, usually you have your two linemen who coordinate on that first initial block. And one of them has to release off that block and get to the second level and figure out who in the second level they're going to take on that next block. And that timing between those two offensive linemen and knowing who's going to release, who's going to go make that block, that takes time. That's something that, especially when you essentially have two brand new starters on the interior of the offensive line. And that's important because those are often the guys who are, helping with that two-man block on the first level. That's a big component of this. And it was never going to click immediately. Let me say, this offense was never going to click immediately. I'll be blunt. I'm kind of surprised this offense is functioning as well as it is, as quickly as it is, because of what Arthur Smith wants to do. So where that impacts, Mike Davis, I just think at times he's gotten terrible blocking. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's at times, Patterson has gotten better blocking. He's turned it into more. And we've seen instances where, Mike Davis, he's being met by three guys in the backfield. So some of it, I think, is just the poor luck that he's had. But I think there's a lot of things, and that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think that's a good take too. And some of it's just bad luck on Davis's part, in my opinion, as well. So there's just not much. It's hard to quantify that, and there's just not a lot you can do about that. But yeah. All right, got another question from Ollie. I know Ollie is not, I believe, in the U.S. I think he told me where he was from before, but I forget. But I know he said it would be like really late when this was starting where he lives. So he says, am I getting excited too early? Because with the NFC the way it is at the moment, I like the Falcons to pick up a playoff spot. What do you guys think is our ceiling for the rest of the season? Is sort of the part one of the question. So we'll start with that. Gina, since we haven't heard from you yet, what do you think is sort of the ceiling for the season?
I mean, the ceiling is 13-4.
Yeah.
They could win out,
That's technically possible. Yeah.
We are coming off of one of the weirdest weekends of football that I've ever seen in my life. Like, really, anything can happen. So the ceiling is definitely, a lot more wins over the rest of the season, definitely a playoff spot. Are they going to do that? My expectations are still kind of hovering right around 9-8. I think that based on what we've seen from the team, probably since the London game, I think that I think that they'll finish pretty strong. But yeah, I still think that there's a pretty big learning curve for this offense, especially for the defense. There's a learning curve still that they're working through. And so, yeah, I'm going to say I still think right around 9-8 is where they'll finish this year.
Yeah, that's what I predicted this preseason. And I still think that's sort of where we're headed. I mean, at this point, it wouldn't shock me if they end up at I think if they end up within a few wins or losses of that's probably the most likely, between say 10-7 and 7 and 8 and 9 or something like that. I think that sort of window is probably what we're looking at. And I think 10-7 probably gets it done in this NFC. 9-8 might too, but we just don't know how the rest of the teams are going to shake out because it's very volatile right now. There's a lot of teams with 3 wins. If the Falcons don't beat the Cowboys this week and get to 4-5, those teams with 3 wins are all going to start threatening. So it's so tenuous right now, and the Falcons definitely are the slimmest of front runners for the 7th seed at this point. I would not really even consider them front runners, seeing as I think 538 gives them a 20% chance of making the playoffs, even though they're technically slated for a spot right now. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, I'm sort of with Gina there about 9-8. Dave, what are you thinking?
I've got about 8 and 9. I'm right where I was. I'm trying not to move off that. I think one of the things that I maybe used to do more than I do today is change my predictions pretty drastically according to a couple of weeks here and there. And I predicted 8 and 9 coming into the year. I look at the remaining schedule. I see a 4-5 record the rest of the way. I am tempted to say they can beat the Cowboys without Randy Gregory and Tyron Smith. I'm tempted to say that they can, sneak one against the Saints, the Buccaneers. I'm really tempted to say that against the Saints. But I think in that range of 8 or 9 wins is probably where they're going to end up. And I think, if you're looking at 9 wins, if you're looking at 10 somehow, they probably could make it as a 7th seed in the NFC this year. And I would love to see it. I think that would be amazing. But to me, like, you look at this team and like who are they really at this point is still kind of an open question. They're winning these late games, last second frantic drives that they're pulling off. And then, sort of in other weeks, like against Carolina, they just look completely listless and defeated. So I don't think that we have, even at the halfway mark of the season, kind of a full measure of where this team is going and what they're capable of. So right now, I'm going to say they can knock off the teams on their schedule that are, not super difficult on paper, and they're probably going to lose most of those games to sort of the tougher opponents, of which there are quite a few left. That Bills game is on the road in January is terrifying, but
Yeah.
I also do think that, the glimpses of something better that we've seen from this team are enough for me to think that like next year is going to be much better, assuming they have a good offseason. But it's also enough for me to think, we might be here a month from now, me saying I never expected them to knock off, Team X, Team Y. So,
Right.
I'm going 8-9. I do think they can do better than that, and I'd love to see it start in Dallas.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because at this point, 8 and 9, you just win 4 games over the next 9, so that doesn't seem out of reach for this team at all. But the problem with me has been like consistency, and there hasn't been like any of that so far. So that is where I get skeptical. DW, where are you at? Are you still holding to your original prediction, or have you moved up or down at this point?
I'm with Dave. I think 8-9 is where I'm feeling comfortable. But I will say this: if you look at the Panthers game and you take that into context, where they lost Ridley essentially right before the game, they had practiced all week planning on Calvin being in that game. If you sort of take that and say, okay, maybe their game plan was disrupted, it threw the team off, it threw the team atmosphere off. They came out listless, as Dave said. If you go back to the Washington game, they've scored 30 points, 27 points, 30 points, skip Carolina, and then 27 points against the Saints. I bring that up because I think this offense is actually starting to click, and that's without Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
And what that tells me is I think we're actually beginning to see the signs that Arthur Smith, as a week-to-week game planner, is doing a really good job. The one week where he didn't do well was the week where his star receiver was a sudden last-minute cut. But since Washington, he has been able to put 27 or more points on the board consistently. If that holds up, I think they can sneak into that 9 or 10 win territory. And a lot of that will be determined by how they play against the Cowboys, because I'm on record as saying it's going to be a shootout. I don't think we'll see the punters during this game. So if you love punter battles, you may want to tune out of this one. But if they score really well against the Cowboys, I'm looking at the rest of the schedule, and I think they could win in some shootouts. So I'm a little bit more optimistic, but I think realistically 8-9 is probably still the sweet spot, because they still have that tendency, especially with this defense, to just drop one that they shouldn't be dropping. So
yeah, that's the thing. It's like they've dropped some that they definitely shouldn't have dropped, Washington being the one that really stands out. But they won that Saints game that they probably shouldn't have won. So, maybe if they could pull out some of those too, you get on the winning side of that 8-9 wins sort of calculus. But yeah, I mean, I think that's totally fair. And yeah, I mean, the fact that they're 4-4 right now, I think they always kind of have been a 500 team, so that's pretty much tracks perfectly what I think with most of us were expecting. So it really just depends if they can become more consistent and actually start stringing together some wins and beating some of these tough opponents. They did it. They got off on the right foot there with the Saints, but the Cowboys are a whole other beast, and that this is a great offense coming into the building. With a defense that's not great, certainly easier to exploit than the Saints defense, but what can the Falcons defense do against Dallas is the big question. And, is it enough? And I don't know about that. So we'll see. Probably not. But, if the offense can just score and we can have a shootout, then, really, like if the Falcons have the ball at the end of the game and are in position to win it, then I think they'll probably win it. And if they don't, then they're probably not going to win it. So that could easily be what this game is. I think the fact that the Falcons are 8-point underdogs is a little bit disrespectful, considering that's the same. We talked about it in the chat. It's the same spread between the Lions and the Steelers. And and the Falcons are actually bigger underdogs according to the money line. So, I think if you're an inclined betting person and you have a lot of faith in the Falcons, Falcons at plus 290, that's you could win some money there if you're confident. Don't put a lot down, but as part of a parlay or something. I'm a betting neophyte, but hey, that doesn't seem like the worst bet in the world. I think those odds are a little disrespectful to Atlanta, but let me get another question in here. So we got from Solaire, who put in some questions early. He already asked DW this, but he wants to know what the best food at the Ben's is and why is it ice cream? So yeah, I mean, I personally, I was there 2 times, and one time when I was there, they had this like baked mac and cheese thing that was amazing. I think it had like bacon and all kinds of stuff on it. So that was my personal favorite. But the ice cream is very good. I don't know if you guys
is
have
he
your
asking
own
about
takes.
At the concourse, like
I don't
fans
know,
or for the media?
I don't know. I mean, it could probably be either one. I mean, I was eating, the media's food, which was very good. So I'm sure there's really good food on the concourse too. But
yeah, the Ben's has actually probably the best press box food that I've had. Prior to the Ben's being built, it was Mile High out in Denver. But as far as food in the concourse, it's chicken sausage. Okay, there's a stand, and you can get chicken sausage sandwiches, like a chicken sausage Philly, and another one. The chicken sausage is actually my favorite, like real meal there. I don't usually get dessert because I am always drinking overpriced Tito's and sodas. So that's where my money and calories go instead of dessert. But yeah, as far as the meal, I really, really like the chicken sausage stand.
okay,
Who's the chef that's got the
Kevin Gillespie.
Yes, Gillespie has a spot in the Ben's, and he has the not closed on Sunday chicken sandwich, which is really good as well. I've had that, and then they have Farm Burger, which is one of my favorite burger places because it's all farm or grass-fed beef. So if you like burgers, I'd recommend trying Farm Burger. That's one of the best ones there.
Farm Burger also has gluten-free options, which is good to know for people like me. Anybody else who has issues with gluten.
Yeah, I know they do have some options in the stadium, which is really nice to see. 'Cause my wife is gluten-free as well, so always nice to know that there's stuff you can get in the stadium. All right, let's move on to our next question. So we had from Jonathan Wiggins. He says, short-time patron, first-time question asker. And first of all, he wants to know if there's anything in particular, Gina, that you've been mad online about this week.
I think it's just the fact that I have to unpack now that we've gotten through moving. Like, I'm very mad online about this. I'm indignant about it. I should just be done moving when I'm done moving, and my stuff should just magically put itself away. So right now, that's what I'm the most mad online about.
Yeah. I mean, moving is the worst.
And the Falcons beat the Saints. I can't be mad about the Falcons. As that game was going through the fourth quarter, I was like, oh, this is going to be what I'm mad online about all week. But then they threw a wrench in that by actually not blowing it. So now I have to be mad online about unpacking instead.
Yep. Got to find something else. And then the non-silly question is, what is with Arthur Smith's obsession with second and long runs? I mean, I think it's him sort of wanting to take heat off the offensive line. That's honestly my opinion on it, is that he doesn't want this team to be facing 3rd and 10 or longer under any circumstances, because I think, this team is not particularly good at converting those long third downs.
This team is not particularly good at converting those runs on second downs either.
No, that's exactly correct. And, you guys can speak on it. But yeah, I feel like the success rate of a 2nd and 10 run is so unlikely, particularly with this running game. I mean, if you had a really great run game, it's like, okay, maybe you could justify it. But this run game, it's very difficult to make it worthwhile. But I don't know if you guys have any sort of, justification that you like for it, or if we should just sort of stay pissed off about it.
I didn't
Dirk Cutter's ghost.
Yeah, Dirk Cutter. Yeah, exactly.
Dirk Cutter's ghost. That's it.
That's to blame. I didn't really go back and watch Titans games after Smith was hired. So I don't know if this was a hallmark of his offense there or not. But like Derrick Henry is a very different back than the backs that the Falcons have, obviously, to work with. And so I don't know, maybe it's just something that's worked for him in the past. And with this line and these backs, they're not going to get it done. I don't know, but I hate it. And I wish that they would stop doing it.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the second and long run defender, I guess.
All right, good. Good. We know who to tweet at. Yeah.
Yeah, you can give your angry tweets to me. No, I think you have to be able to run on second and long, because if you become a team that only ever passes on second and long, like that's a problem too. You become predictable offensively as well. And I've watched the Falcons games a lot, the 2016 games. If you go back and look, that 2016 unit ran a lot on second and long. They ran quite frequently on second and long. And it keeps the defenses honest to where they can't, just drop 9 in the coverage because they know you're just not going to run it. That said, I think we have to give Arthur Smith a little bit of time to figure out what is and isn't going to work offensively. He's still trying to see, okay, how well are Hennessy, Mayfield doing on the interior? Is this the week where it clicks for them and that second long run up the middle actually gets something done? Right now he's trying to figure out all the things that work with, the personnel he has. So he's going to do some things that frankly are going to drive us a little bit crazy, including the Felipe Franks shit. But he's experimenting. And I think we have to be a little bit patient that he's going to do stuff that we're going to look at and we're going to be like, that was stupid. That was awful. And it's probably stuff that he saw in practice that was like, oh, that could really work. And then it got on the field and it didn't for whatever reason. So I think I'm going to defend him in this and say that he gets a free pass from me, at least for this season, until he can figure out how good his guys are up front, how good their development is going. And to see, how they're progressing. Because if he can't ever run on second and long, then this offense is going to be dysfunctional, period.
Yeah.
So right now he's just going to have to fail until he knows that they're ready to succeed.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you there. Like, nobody runs on 2nd and 10. Like, nobody doesn't ever run on 2nd and 10. Like, you're 2nd and long. Like, that's not realistic. I think it's more like people who criticize second and long runs are probably looking at like, if you do it like more than 50% of the time or things like that, then people get upset. And, there's a few teams that do that. I don't know if the Falcons honestly run on 2nd and 10 more than 50% of the time. I don't think they do. So, we're not quite that bad, but it's more glaring, when you get nothing on the run and it's like 2nd and 9 and it's like, wow, great job, guys. We might as well have chucked a deep bomb if we were going to get nothing on that play. But, I tend to agree with DW in that, I think that Arthur Smith is sort of feeling things out and working on, ideas about what to do. And, hopefully the 2nd and 10 runs become a small, but at least marginally effective part of the playbook instead of a, part of the playbook that is anger, rage inducing every time we see it. So that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm hoping for there.
Interesting thing though. So yeah. I needed to look this up. So 2nd and 10 plus, the Falcons have their highest yards per attempt of any rushing situation in 2nd and 10 plus.
That's great.
So
and is it still like depressingly bad even then? Or
it's 5.3 yards per carry.
Wow.
18 attempts. So they're actually doing quite well in that specific situation.
That's great.
So I guess maybe the question is, why are you running on any other down and distance?
Right. Yeah. Then stop the 1st and 10 runs. Start the 2nd.
Yeah, just 2nd and 10 only. That's all we need.
That's really where we start to make some headway. I think that maybe Dave's discovered the secret. Yeah. I mean, I should have trusted Dave to find this information from the beginning. So now we understand. All right.
I love the little random stats. That's what keeps
they
me
are
going.
Fun. They're definitely fun. All right. From Solaire, he says, first of all, Kevin, it's not really a question, but please tank our fantasy matchup this weekend. Sorry, Solaire, I unintentionally tanked the last week's fantasy matchup. So you're going to be out of luck on this one because I probably need to start winning these games. I can't let any of you guys in the patron league, win the championship because then I'd have to let you on the show. So that's just not gonna happen. I'm gonna have to defend the show's honor. But he also asks, all right, out of the offensive guru coaches that are on the hot seat this year or could be in the near future, who do we think gets fired first? Matt Nagy, Kyle Shanahan, or Mike McCarthy? I think Mike McCarthy's like probably safer than anyone thinks because the Cowboys are doing well. But if they like collapse again, like if they lose to the Falcons this week and this is sort of the beginning of like a collapse, I absolutely think Mike McCarthy's on the hot seat because I don't think they want to lose Kellen Moore. So I think that could be a weird scenario. But of the other two, like Nagy and Shanahan, that's a tough call because the Bears seem totally unwilling to get rid of Matt Nagy. And the 49ers also seem very, reluctant to get rid of Kyle Shanahan. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think about who's the hottest seat of those guys.
I mean, I really think that it's Nagy.
Yeah, it should
I
be.
really do. I was just so confused about the way that he decided to use Justin Fields early. I think that we've all seen enough out of Andy Dalton at this point. Like, he is a serviceable backup, but he was not a guy who should be starting over Justin Fields. Bears fans have been calling for his head for years. So, and I think that they also need to clean house in their front office. I think that that's really the most likely coach to go first. I think Shanahan, it's only been 2 years since he took the team to a Super Bowl. There's really not a lot of excuse for San Francisco's performance this year because they are stacked with talent. But I think that it's more likely that if they continue kind of a downward trajectory, that we'll see Kyle on the hot seat next season. McCarthy is so established, and Jerry Jones, you've got to remember how long he held on to Jason Garrett, years and years and years after it made sense to keep him as head coach. And so I think that McCarthy is probably going to get a pretty long leash, especially because the Cowboys were really effective earlier in the season. And this might just be, kind of a blip as far as their performance against Denver, although it was a really ugly blip. If that's what
Yeah, that's totally fair. Yeah, I mean, I would lean towards Nagy too, just because he's the worst coach of the options. Nagy's shown that he's basically like taken a team with a great defense and like just needed to get the offense to like a functional point and has really failed to do so. So yeah, I think it's Nagy. But what do you DW and Dave? What's your thoughts on that? Is it going to be Nagy or Shanahan fired first?
It'll be Nagy, and he'll be an Atlanta coach next year.
No, I think they got the Bears coach they wanted, and that was Dave Ragone, who seems like maybe it wasn't his fault that the Bears were, bad.
I think Gina's point is an important one because I think it applied to Dan Quinn. When you get to the big dance, you get a lot more grace from that head office, and Nagy doesn't have that going for him. Shanahan does. I think that's the big difference.
Yeah, I agree.
I think too, like to piggyback on that, I feel like Kyle Shanahan kind of hired John Lynch, whereas Ryan Pace kind of hired Matt Nagy. And so, Pace is going to push Nagy out the door to save himself, if that's even possible, given the way he's handled personnel in Chicago. Whereas like San Francisco, it feels kind of like Lynch wouldn't even be there if Shanahan wasn't there in the first place. So
yeah.
Maybe I'm misreading that, but I also just feel like because Shanahan is such a darling of, everyone, really, because he's had so many brilliant seasons, he is going to get the benefit of the doubt that a Matt Nagy just doesn't get. So
yeah.
I think he'll be the first one. And doesn't deserve. And that's the fun thing, too, is like seeing, I got to get the Falcons angle in here, seeing Dave Ragone and Charles London come over from Chicago. Charles London obviously working well with Matt Ryan. I'm not going to say that he's improved Matt Ryan because, Matt Ryan's a veteran quarterback, but clearly a good coach. And Dave Ragone and him coming over and being like, hey, we should sign Cordarrelle Patterson. He might be special. I feel like the brain trust left the building in Chicago. So
I think it's entirely possible. Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, I've liked what we've seen from Dave Ragone and, Charles London, total wild card at QB coach. But I mean, Matt Ryan's deep ball is maybe the best it's ever been. And who else is responsible for that if not the quarterback's coach, helping him out? So I don't know, for sure, but it's obviously encouraging to have that. at this point.
It kills me too. Like Dave Ragone was at one point my backup quarterback in like Madden 2004 or 5 or something like that. And like I won Super Bowls with that guy. So when they got him on the coaching staff, I was like, no way. So I have a deep-seated interest in seeing him succeed.
Yes, a deep personal connection to Dave Ragone from the old school Madden days. I love that. That's a nice little nugget there. All right, from Brian McWhorter, he says, when do you guys think we will see Marvin Hall? I think it'll be this week, but I don't know. It'll probably be this week, though.
I think it'll be this week.
Yeah.
This Cowboys secondary is suspect.
They allow a lot of big plays.
Yeah, I think
6.0 yards per play.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity here in Dallas, and Marvin Hall is always good for that one long touchdown catch. So let's make it Sunday.
Yeah. Also think this is Kyle Pitt's game too. So yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was just going to say Aaron Freeman's got a piece coming tomorrow on Kyle Pitts and his potential to break out against Dallas. I think that's a given, but I also think, you get Marvin Hall out there, you get Russell Gage out there, you get Lamade Zaccheaus out there. These guys are all fast, and they can beat man coverage, especially if, something happens, somebody slips, etc. And, for the Falcons, like I would hammer that. I try to get those explosive plays because it is the only way you are going to beat Dallas.
Yeah.
And
go ahead. Yeah.
Interestingly, Mike Rothstein on his podcast, I listened to it today, had the Dallas reporter, and he said Dan Quinn right now in Dallas is running a lot of man coverage. He has completely abandoned the cover 3. And so we're going to see a lot of man matchups. And I think to Dave's point, those fast receivers may have some opportunities because they don't have the corners across the board that I think are quality enough to consistently hold up in man coverage.
Yeah. No, that's a great point for sure. And like Trayvon Diggs has obviously been, kind of a media darling for the interceptions, but when he's not getting interceptions, he's giving up big plays. So, I mean, it's kind of an interesting dichotomy because obviously if you're getting that many turnovers, you're a very good cornerback. Like that is a game-changing attribute and something that shouldn't be disrespected. But then you have another type of corner in AJ Terrell who's a much quieter sort of good player who's just sort of making the plays and preventing these plays, but he's also not really giving up plays to begin with. So, it's tough to say like what's better for a defense. I think the Falcons certainly would love to get some more turnovers, but interesting to see because these are two guys from the same draft class, totally different styles. And I think it makes sense. Trayvon Diggs is a great, ball hawk. I mean, he was a receiver. So it's interesting to see that cornerback duel, and maybe we'll get some more clarity on that. But, Diggs has given up some big plays, also very, very opportunistic. And that's been a big part of Dallas's defense in general. Is that sort of live or die by the turnover. And they haven't gotten any turnovers the last 2 games. And this past one against the Broncos, they got sort of blasted. So we'll see. We'll see if that's something meaningful for this game. And the Falcons, to their credit, have been pretty good at avoiding turnovers, but outside of a few games here and there. So, all right. We got another one from Ollie. So he says, what for us would be the real measure of a successful season under Arthur Smith this year? That's a tough question. Yeah. I guess to me, like, I just wanted competence, after last year, just competence. And that's like not really a record thing, but just a general feeling of like this team is in good hands and like going in the right direction. And at this point in the season, I do feel that way. I would like to see them get to a winning record, even if it's just 9-8. But I don't think that's a requirement for a good season. I think, as long as they don't like collapse in the second half and finish strong and are basically competitive week in and week out, I think that's kind of, to me, a successful season. But I'm interested to hear, what you guys think, DW. What would be a successful season in your eyes?
A few things. Number one, setting the groundwork for what he wants to do from a team culture and a offensive and defensive standpoint. And I think a lot of that's already been done. you look at guys like Matt Hennessy, Jalen Hawkins, AJ Terrell, a bunch of second-year guys who are now quality starters. And Hawkins will probably be a full-time starter next year with the way he's playing. He's laying the groundwork with a lot of young guys. So I think that is, something to continue to keep an eye on. The culture we've already seen, in these first few games, Matt Ryan has 3 fourth quarter comebacks, and those have been lacking the past couple of years under Dan Quinn. Those games would collapse and just completely spiral out of control. And now we're seeing, they're fighting back a little bit more, I think, than they used to under Dan Quinn. So for me, it's about reinventing the culture of this team, which we knew was, this team sort of looked demoralized between 2019 and 2020.
Yeah.
And I think rebuilding the culture was a big thing, and just the continual development of these young guys. Because in my mind, it's still about, how much of this talent can we optimize? Is Jalen Mayfield truly going to be a good, long-term answer at left guard? Is Matt Hennessy the guy at center? If those answers keep coming up, yes, then that's a really good start for his first year.
Yeah. No, all great points there. Gina, what to you would sort of make this a successful year for the Falcons?
Yeah, I agree with everything that David said. Just to add, I do want to see improvement week in and week out. I want to see the mental mistakes being corrected. I want to see, improvements in technique, things like that, because what that tells me is that the coaching staff is getting through to the players. And I feel like that's something that wasn't happening at the level that it needed to during the past couple of years of Dan Quinn's tenure here. So that's one of the main things. And then from Smith too, I feel like he made some missteps and in-game decisions early on, and that's something that should be resolved with more experience. And I feel like he is looking more comfortable in that head coach role, and that's another thing that I think is really important to see over the course of the rest of the season. When you're talking about a rookie head coach, it is a big adjustment to go from a coordinator to a head coaching role, especially when you're still calling the plays on offense, and sometimes that can be a bit much for somebody who's new and inexperienced as a head coach. So just continuing to see that improvement week in and week out. I don't even think that it matters what their record ends up being, as long as, like David said, they're competitive, not getting blown out by the Jets or whatever,
Thankfully that didn't happen. Yeah. We still got a couple of those games to be wary of. We've got the Lions and the Jags. So if we can win those 2 games at least, we'll avoid total disaster. So
yes.
Yeah, good points there. Dave, what to you would make this a successful season?
To me, it's all about how does it set up next year? Because, I was critical of the Falcons for saying they were going to contend after the first 2 weeks where they kind of got blown off the field. Certainly they're in a better spot now, which is great to see, and I'll eat those words. But we all sort of know that, this was a tough cap situation. The Falcons tried very hard to not set themselves up to repeat it in a year from now. And so my hope and thought is that, Tom Brady has to sell his soul back to the devil in due course next year, that the Panthers still haven't figured out their quarterback situation, that the Saints are a lesser version of the Saints, and the Falcons can really compete a year from now. And so to me, it's a question of, do you have enough pieces to do that next year, knowing that maybe you can have a bit more of a productive offseason. You can have a good draft class with that additional second-round pick. You can, add some more free agents because you'll have a little bit more money, especially after you presumably extend Matt Ryan. But, is AJ Terrell, that lockdown guy at the end of the year? Is Ade Ogundeji, a guy that you can count on as a full-time starter, as a pass rusher? Does Richie Grant get on the field and show you something consistently to make you think he's going to be a top-end starter? Just Jalen Hawkins do the same thing? It's really, to me, about who's going to be here next year, and are they going to be ready to really lift their game and contribute? And so to me, yes, I don't want this team to lose the rest of their games and look competitive in every one of them just because I want to watch, enjoyable football on Sunday. But, what I'm really looking for is, are these guys going to be ready next year? Not everybody's going to be here. Not every single rookie is going to look great. I know that. But if you have a foundation you can build off of, and you can have a savvy offseason and really be a contender and not just a but contender. Like, to me, that's the difference maker. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think a big thing with that is like, and we talked about it in the chat a little bit today, is that what happens this year is going to kind of inform their strategy next year. I think like if Matt Ryan really struggled, the team as a whole was pretty bad, they weren't really looking like they were competitive. It's probably like, okay, we're going to tear it down and start over more. Maybe not necessarily completely doing that in 22, but, gearing up for that sort of outcome. But where it is now with Matt Ryan playing great, I think you reevaluate a little bit and say, if Matt Ryan's still playing great, he's going to be 37 next year. It's we can do this for a little bit longer. Let's get Matt Ryan extended and under contract for 3 more years, and we'll try to load up and do this before we have to sort of move on. And I think that's probably closer to where we are right now, based on how well Ryan's playing. But we'll see. But I think right now we're getting closer to what I would call a successful season than a less successful season. But 9 games to go, so Falcons could disappoint or surprise. Anything is possible right now. All right, we got from Nico. He says, "Is it premature to start wondering if Marlon Davidson will ever become the player we hoped for when picking him in the second round?" Yeah, that's a tough one. And I think it's not entirely Marlon's fault, because I think he was drafted to play in a defense that doesn't really exist anymore here in Atlanta. I don't know that I think his role might be different than they expected. It's always tough to miss as much time as he did his rookie year. And, he missed some time this year as well. I'm not like concerned about Davidson at this point, but certainly over his first 2 seasons, it's been disappointing. Dave, what are your thoughts sort of on Marlon Davidson and his growth, or lack thereof, I guess, over the first 2 seasons?
Well, I'm in the same boat with Marlon Davidson as I am with Mike Davis. You're sensing a theme here where this is a guy that I really think still has the talent to be special. I certainly hyped him up a little bit heading into this year. I think it's really hard for anybody who misses, a lot of time, and not, in one big swath, but misses a game here, a set of games here, to settle in. And I still think that talent is there, and that we've seen glimpses of it. Certainly, I don't think Ogundeji gets that field goal block without him doing what he needed to do there. And he's certainly got the power, the athleticism, the talent to make a big difference on this defense. I just think where the defense is as unsettled as it is, where he's missed time, probably we're looking at him arriving, so to speak, next year. Obviously, that third year is a pivotal year for a lot of players anyways, but for somebody like Davidson, who, just hasn't been able to be on the field, for 16 games or anywhere close to it to this point, 17 games, I guess now, I got to get used to that. We're just not there yet where I'm going to say this guy is, to use Falcoholic Matt's favorite term, bust. He's not. I think the talent is still there. I think he just needs a combination of the opportunity and the continuity to make that happen.
Yeah, I agree. DW, what are your thoughts on Marlon Davidson so far? And you think he's still got a chance to sort of live up to that second round pedigree?
Yeah, I find it funny. We sort of, as fans, try to move on really quickly from players. In case in point, Isaiah Oliver. Look, the new coaching staff, and honestly, it goes back to Raheem Morris and Jeff Ulbrich last year. Actually, did a good job when they moved him into the slot as the nickel corner. And he was in year 3 before they made that change. And most fans had written him off after year 2. And I think the same is probably going to be true with Marlon Davidson. As Dave said, I think the injuries, the COVID stuff, really set him back. Look at this last game. He actually had a fairly good game when you had Anthony Rush and Mike Pennell, taking on double teams where they were occupying 2 guys, and Marlon and Grady were finally able to sort of see, one-on-one matchups. They were getting some, good looks and doing a fairly good job. So especially in the second half of that Saints game, Rush and Pennell opened up opportunities for Grady and Davidson to do what they do best, and that's penetrate. And that Saints rushing offense wasn't nearly as good in the second half. So, yeah, I think the signs are there that he can still turn it around. And just as a personal philosophy, I am not a fan of writing off guys after 2 years, period.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because as Dave said, there are so many stories of guys who didn't really turn it on until year 3, including some top tier players who in their first couple of years were pretty bad and ended up being, really quality starters for their careers. So, yeah, I still have a lot of hope in Davidson, and I think he's got the tools to do it.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we're going to do one more here, another one from Nico, and I'll go to Gina on this one first. Are you surprised that we aren't seeing more of Mykal Walker this season? I think a lot of us had high hopes for him after his impressive rookie season. Yeah, I mean, that's a big question I think a lot of fans are asking right now. Gina, do you have a take on Mykal Walker?
I've been surprised that we haven't seen more out of him, but I've actually been surprised with a lot of the playing time decisions so far. And, I think especially looking at the young players early in the season, David and I have talked about this on the podcast, but, I'm wondering if they're trying to keep guys fresh for later in the season or what the deal is. But yeah, no, I don't have any idea what the reason could be, but I have been surprised by how few snaps he's gotten.
Yeah, I mean, I think, he had a good rookie year. He didn't play a massive role, but certainly a complimentary role and was good in that role. PFF seems to love him for whatever reason. Like he'll play like a handful of snaps every game and just get a great grade. So, I don't necessarily know what's going on there. They also seem to hate Deion Jones and Foye Oluokun, but whatever. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an open question at this point. Part of me wonders if they really want to get Deion Jones as much exposure as possible because they're hoping that he has a great season, which he's having a very good season so far, and then maybe hoping to get a big pick for him and get the salary cap relief this offseason. So they're sort of like, let's just put Deion out there as much as possible, get him the exposure. Maybe the same thing you could say about Foye, where they want to see what they have in him to decide, if they want to re-sign him or not, because one of those guys is probably leaving because of the salary cap situation. So, maybe they sort of know what they have in Mykal Walker and they're going to work him in here and there. And they're going to maybe slate him for a bigger role next year. They're just sort of more focused on trying to figure out, what do we want to do with the other two main guys in Foye and Deion. DW, do you have a take on Walker?
He's a bust.
There you go. I thought you said DW moments ago, no, we can't judge guys, but now you have a firm take. Yeah.
I got possessed by the spirit of Chambers there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It happens to all of us sometimes.
Yeah. Honestly, the thing to remember here is brand new defense, very complicated defense. And it's entirely possible that Dean Pease is just looking at some of these young guys and saying, you're not ready yet. You're just not ready yet. It may be a tough lift for some guys versus others. And it could be as simple as that. So I don't think it's necessarily his talent. It could just be that right now he's not grasping everything he needs to grasp. I go back to this. Dean Pease has emphasized this as well. Linebackers, safeties, and corners in his defense, they have to know the responsibilities for all of those positions. And that's a heavy lift for any of those guys. So it's probably not surprising that some of the younger guys may be struggling a little bit with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and Richie Grant's another guy that fans are sort of clamoring for, that Dean Pease has sort of been like, look, like I'm not going to play him until I think that he needs to be out there. And, I know a lot of people are panicking about that, but I don't know that that's warranted, because I think what we've seen from Grant when he's out there has been, mostly fine, like not alarming, but, it's always nice to just like see a rookie and have a firm take. It's nice to see like a Kyle Pitts and be like, oh yeah, he's great. It's nice when that happens, but it's very rare that you get such a clean picture of a player. Even Jalen Mayfield, who is a full-time starter, we don't really have the clearest picture of him, because we saw, disaster, and then we saw rebound, and then we've seen, not disaster over the last, several games. So Mayfield, also is another open question. Like, is this season of sort of up and down play for Mayfield, like, is that enough that you're comfortable with him as your starter going forward? And it's like, I don't know. That's way above my pay grade. But At least you're seeing him. So at least you have some idea. With a guy like Richie Grant, it's like we're not really seeing him. So it's a little uncomfortable. I get that. But great questions tonight, guys. Really appreciate everyone for chipping in. Love all the questions, love all the chat, and love tonight's guests for taking the time to hang out with the patrons and answer some questions. First of all, want to thank Mr. David Walker, aka DW, at Falcoholic DW on Twitter, host of the Falcoholic podcast. DW, anything else you'd like to plug tonight?
Just check out the podcast. We'll have a preview of the Cowboys game coming up. I think it'll land tomorrow. And we do have our voicemails podcast. Gina and I will be recording that at some point. It'll probably land on sometime this weekend. As you can imagine, there was a good bit of celebrating after a hate week win. So be on the lookout for that.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be a lot of fun, guys. Check that one out for sure. Always look forward to those when they drop. Speaking of Gina Kelly, she is on Twitter at Gina Thomas. Gina, anything you'd like to plug tonight?
Yeah, both of the podcasts that David just mentioned, I will be on. And you can also, I think they're both going to drop tomorrow, the Blogging the Boys pregame video show, podcast. Well, I don't know. I don't know what the exact title is.
Yeah.
That one, you can find it on Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. And also Girls Talking Boys, which is one of the podcasts under the Blogging the Boys umbrella with Kelsey Charles and Megan Murray. And I recorded that last night. That was a lot of fun. Lots of good info there. So check those out for sure. Yeah,
guys, check that out if you want a little more intel on the Cowboys or just want to hear Gina on another podcast appearance, which is also understandable. We also have, finally, last but not least, Dave Choate, the Falcoholic himself. Dave, anything you'd like to plug before we sign off tonight?
Just the great work everybody else is doing. And, of course, the Falcons beating the Cowboys on Sunday. I'd like to plug that.
Yes, I would like to put that firmly out into the universe as well. That would be big. First winning record since 2017 if we can get it done. So, we should have got it done against the Panthers. So I think
that one hurts.
That one hurts. So we need to get it done this time because it's not going to get any easier next week, Thursday Night Football against the Patriots, who seem to really have this team's number. So, we'll see. But, guys, again, thank you so much for tuning in, for hanging out with us. For everyone else that's not a patron that's going to be watching this when it's not live, you guys can sign up at patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. We've got lots of great exclusive content there for you, including high-quality ad-free versions of the podcast episodes, as well as exclusive access to the post-game show podcast. We also have these Q&As, of course, and some other fun stuff, including the Patron Fantasy League, which Solaire mentioned. And guys, I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. You can check out my content on thefalcoholic.com, where you can get all kinds of terrific written and other coverage of the team. So again, guys, thank you so much. Have a great night. We will see you Sunday on the next episode of the Falcoholic Live, hopefully recapping a win over the Cowboys, but either way, I'll be here. So, we'll just be hoping for that. I've been enjoying getting some wins on this show after 2020, which was, just terrible. So have a great night, folks. We'll see you on Sunday.